Good time up there.
I gotta go home.
Hey, everybody. Morning. Welcome to the February 17th, 2023 Stratford MPO Policy Committee meeting. It is 9:08. We've got people participating in person as well as a number of people participating remotely. There's looks like it's people from staff and a guest or two. And in person, we'll get to that in a minute. Why don't we start with Bill in the room?
Bill Fisher, Farmington.
Don Hammond, Rochester. Wayne Burton, Durham. I'm Grassy Maverick.
Peter Nelson, Newmarket.
Aaron Golab, Milton. Barbara Holstein, Rochester.
Katrin Casper Lee.
Chris Horton, Summersworth.
Joe Woodrow, Rochester.
Mike Levinsky, Summersworth.
Mark Richardson, Summersworth.
Clyde Harrison, New Hampshire DOT.
Dave Landry, Dover.
Colin Lentz, Stratford Regional Planning.
Jen Sis, Stratford Regional Planning.
Remotely, I got, let's see, Jessica Wilcox, yes.
Yes, good morning, Jessica Wilcox, DES.
Steve Pesci, UNH.
Yep. Good morning, Steve Pesci, University of New Hampshire.
Colleen Anderson, Nottingham.
Yes, Charlene Anderson, Planning Board member, Nottingham.
Sophie Robinson, I think Dover.
Good morning, Sophie Robeson, Dover, New Hampshire.
And we have somebody from Lee, Mary Woodward, who's observing and considering joining this auspicious bunch. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay. And
Suspicious?
yeah, I think suspicious.
I heard auspicious. And we got,
Let's go with auspicious.
and we got staff, Rachel, Jackson, and Mark. Thank you for joining us. And Megan is also standing by.
Okay, so we have to open the public hearing on the 2023-2026 Transportation Improvement Plan. And is that considered open, or do I need a vote to open a public meeting?
We need a vote.
Of everybody, a roll call? Just open.
Chair, you just open it.
Fine, I just opened it. Thank you very much.
That's
Saved 17 minutes right there.
that's great. Yeah.
Okay, so you're up, Val.
I'm up, and I will try to keep it short and sweet. You'll notice we added some time to the agenda to do kind of around the table updates and so forth, and we hope to make that more of a permanent thing. Now I get to struggle with the PowerPoint nonsense. Jen's going to take over. Thank you. So we have a public hearing for an update to the Transportation Improvement Program. This is our section of the statewide Transportation Improvement Program. This is federal funds for transportation projects occurring over the next 4 years. Every MPO has a Metropolitan Transportation Plan. That's a long-range document looking at the next 20 years of funding and potential projects. And so the 4-year part is a part of that. And so anytime we update one, we update the other, is the short version of that. So I'm just going to go through some of those updates. The state is updating the 4-year part, and every MPO in the state is doing a similar update. And sorry, MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization. So that's any urbanized area over 50,000 people when we deal with transportation dollars from the federal government. So this is just a graphic kind of explaining what I was just talking about, where the best metaphor I've come up with for our Metro plan is an assembly line. We're looking at projects way out in the future for their kind of at the vision stage. It'd be awesome to have a passenger rail stop in Newmarket. That's going to take a while to plan. So we're building that as we go along, or a new rail trail between Newmarket and Barrington. And we're adding pieces on, getting cost estimates, and maybe they move into the state's 10-year plan. And then eventually, as we get closer to construction, it goes into that 4-year plan. So building the car on the assembly line, and eventually we have a new rail trail or a bridge or passenger rail stop. So for the TIP update, there are new projects that are moving into that 4-year period. Some of them are just starting with the preliminary engineering side of things. We get transit funds and look at our fiscal constraint. That meaning we're only spending the dollars that we have available. We're not making up projects that don't have money attached to them. I've improved our maintenance and operations, the way we present that amount of those funds so that we can see the details. We updated performance targets recently, if you remember. Those will go into the plan as we discussed before. The Metro Plan has a financial chapter, and I'll look at that in a second. Looking at those out years dollars, we have no way of really accurately saying how much a project will cost 20 years from now, but we can look at inflation and other things and make a best guess, and everyone agrees on the best way to guess around the state. And I'll leave it at that. So we have a few projects being added to the TIP. Some of these were in the future 6 years of the state's 10-year plan, and now they're ready for that preliminary engineering side of things. Barrington is getting their first sidewalks in 8 or 9 years. So, but those are in the plan, and that's a big deal for Barrington. The Exit 10 study of the Spalding Turnpike, as well as an economic development study for that general region of how do we better utilize the turnpike for all the economic development stuff that's going on in the region. Sidewalks in Farmington, they're expanding their network. And Milton is expanding some sidewalks and doing some underground utility stuff. And then Rochester has a big project up on Route 11 with sidewalks and signalization and capacity improvements. So the 3 sidewalk projects were actually from our last round of 10-year plan projects. So those are now already moving forward, which is great. Any questions thus far? We've got new folks, and I'm trying to go fast and keep it broad, but raise your hand and stop me anytime. Some projects were completed during the last TIP process, and this gets updated every 2 years. I failed to say that. The TIP itself gets updated every 2 years. And so several projects were completed during the last 2-year phase. The interchange in Durham at 108 and US 4, and the Lowell Street intersection in Rochester, and the Little Bay Bridges, part of the Newington Dover project, is all but complete. You'll notice they're working on the all electronic tolling, and as I mentioned to the executive committee, the General Sullivan Bridge replacement is also moving forward. Don't need to look at the numbers specifically here. This is just an example of we're improving our cost estimation process and abilities over time. The biggest one being that we hired a consultant to do the engineering on potential projects. So we're building out that pool of potential projects. If a community comes to us and say, hey, we want to build X, Y, and Z, we can prioritize all those potential projects and get a professional engineer to get a cost estimate for a roundabout or sidewalks or what have you, and make some more reasonable expectations of what that's going to cost. So these are just some examples of you have Vision Project in the middle there. These are all for Durham. The roundabout project there at the top is from the actual engineer that we hired. And then the project on the bottom is my best estimate looking at similar projects. And that's an order of magnitude less accurate, with the 30% contingency that we're seeing during the pandemic years and so forth. So we had a number of public comments during the STIP update process. The public comment period started 30 days ago. Dover got a congressionally directed spending award through Senator Sheen's office to do a complete streets project in the southern part of Central Ave, which is awesome. A $6 million project. Coast got 2 similar funding awards for their new facility that they're building that's in design now. That'll basically a replacement whole freight of their operations, maintenance, and administration building. And then the Rochester Riverwalk, they don't have an award yet, but they have a really well built out project and they're looking for funding. So The Dover and the Coast projects automatically will go into the TIP because they have funding, it's ready to go. And the Rochester River Walk is more of a long-term project that's looking for funding. And then I'll have more detail on it. Here is what the Dover project will look like. This will get added in through the state's database and then through ours after this public comment process here. But the funding is ready to go. Earmarks are the old term and so this is a congressional award directly for this project. And just a note that the next round of earmarks for solicitation for those projects is open through March 10th, I believe. So contact me if you want to learn more, or you can look at Shaheen's website. And it's an open process, put your project out there. The new coast projects, you can see the dollar figures there. Pretty big awards. They need to get local funding for those. So they're in the process of that, and they have several avenues for doing that. But the funding is there and they're ready to pull the trigger, so to speak, once they get that local funding. And CDS is just for congressional directed spending or congressionally designated spending. I've seen both words interchangeably. Rochester Riverwalk is a really cool project that would really connect the downtown all the way up through Hanson Pines here, just outside the door. They have a number of phases downtown. There's something called the Intervale that's south of downtown, and they're looking to put an amphitheater in there and a little bridge. So a really cool project. And if it's in the Metro plan, that's a box they can check on grants in the future. It's like, hey, it's in a regional plan that's been approved by the board. So that's a feather in their cap. Through the statewide process, DOT is updating things and improving the specificity of the scopes of projects. So these are some examples of projects that got a little more specific, where the top one, they have a character limit in their database. And so they look a little funny, but it makes sense to the people working on the projects. And I can explain if you have questions, but the Indian Brook Drive to Innovation Drive is kind of the extent of that project. Similarly, the Farmington one added the actual street names, and the Milton project, you can see Silver and Dawson Street. So before it was just 2,700 linear feet of sidewalks. And so now it's a little more specific.
Colin, just a quick one on the Rochester, Summersworth, Dover, complete streets. It doesn't have to be discussed here right now, but good to know kind of next steps, in terms of group meetings and so forth with our consultant. We had a meeting maybe 2 months ago, I think, and was kind of expecting a sooner connection.
I'll follow up on that and see where they are, because I think the next step is the broader public meetings to look at those alternatives and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think each of the communities are sort of waiting for a process of public hearing or a public meeting about what some of the features look like. So
and meanwhile,
we can finalize and get buy-ins.
And meanwhile, a lot of development continues along that corridor.
Definitely on that corridor.
So
particularly for Summersworth. So
good reminder. Let's chat after the meeting.
So I have a really quick question on that. Because I know what the complete streets is, but referred to here, and that's been ongoing for many years, almost 20 probably in part. The one on top. Does that tie in with the $6 million complete streets at Dover, or is that a separate bucket than the previous slide?
Separate, but it is part of 108. And so it's essentially continuous, because you're going to have the southern portion of Central Ave complete streets, Dover's complete overhaul of the downtown, and a little section north of downtown, and then this project is going to start. So you're just going to have that awkward section between the hospital and Weeks Crossing that's not a complete street yet, but essentially 108 through downtown Dover is getting full
clarity.
Full more. Yeah,
thank you. Is that a question, Joe?
Looking at the funding, this has changed a little bit since the initial draft went out because of the public comments. In the yellow box on the right, I added I broke out the federal dollars for transit. I just had the whole numbers before, and I broke out the local match because Post is required to provide 20% match for some of their programs, and for the operating funds, they're actually required to do a 50-50 split on their operating dollars. So in general, federal transportation dollars require a 20% match. In the case of transit, on some of those programs, it's 50-50. So just broke that out for more detail. The big yellow boxes on the top left are the new projects for Dover and Coast. So I added those in as local projects because they will show up as an individual project rather than the general transit program dollars. Looking at operations and maintenance, the little guy up here is kind of in the way, but these are the operations and maintenance dollars. I look at what is programmed in the state's 10-year plan for like roadside paving, those sorts of things. And then I look at what has been in town budgets and what has actually been spent at the local level to get an idea of the operations and maintenance, the demand for those dollars. We don't touch those dollars. It's either local paving or the maintenance districts, but we have this in here as an extra level of detail for Post information. This is for the turnpike. Again, the turnpike is self-funding. We don't see those dollars. They're not technically federal dollars. You go through the turnpike, toll booth, it takes a bit of money and that goes right back into the turnpike for operations and maintenance and improvements. But we include that in here since it's a major part of the highway system. As far as statewide funds for the turnpike, the Spalding accounts for almost exactly 25% of the cost of the turnpike system. And we have 88% of the Spalding turnpike length in our region. And as I mentioned, it's all going all electronic on the Dover and Rochester toll booths. So that's a big change. A lot of that work is the sound walls at the Rochester one. You notice those big giant concrete pylons that they've been building recently. So this is the entire metro plan out through 2045. The yellow box up in the top left is just the 4 years of the tip. And then you see the lighter blue color. That is, so if you add the tip and the 10-year plan, that's all the 10-year plan. And then below that is the out years where those are future dollars that we are estimating based on inflation and trends and so forth. So 10-year plan up through the tip is essentially real dollars that we're expecting. And everything up beyond that is our estimate.
Very quick question.
Yes.
For some people's benefit too here. Is it, as a practical matter, getting your town's project or your city's project into the mix is very, very important. And time passes quite quickly. My question is are there entry points into the transportation improvement plan, the TIP plan? Are there entry points into that for projects that have not originated as being in the 10-year plan?
Yes.
Okay, so if you're not in the 10-year plan, that's okay, because you still have an opportunity to become in this plan.
Really good question. You don't have to start in year 2045 and wait 20 years to get your project done. We'll talk about the congestion mitigation program and the transportation alternatives program. If you get a federal grant for one of those, you go straight into one of these 4 years generally. Our other process for adding new projects takes projects out of here and moves them into the 10-year plan, and they move forward on an assembly line. So yes, it is not, it's if you're building a Model T, they all have to start it at A and go to B, but you can get all the way to the front of the line in various grants. So good question. Same sort of deal, looking at operations and maintenance cost way out in the future, just looking at sort of mathematical trends and inflation and what's going to happen. We can't account for gigantic financial crises and worldwide pandemics and so forth, but we do our best. Getting close to the end here, this is the fiscal constraint sort of visual example where we don't have real dollars out in 2041, but we need to constrain that to a best estimate, and our best estimate of our portion looking out in the future is 10% of federal dollars. So that's the line up at the top. And we just ensure that the funding that we can reasonably expect in any given year isn't above that. So that's sort of our role. So when we get a new project, and approximately every quarter is an opportunity to add new projects in there officially. If a town comes to us and they say, hey, we have this idea for a project, say, great, we can put it in year 2039. And that's essentially arbitrary. So it's not stuck in year 2039. If they get a grant, it can go all the way to 2024 right away. And that's the end of my slides. Any questions? You know, it's kind of a big process. The important parts are, if you get a project in, send it to me soon and we'll get it into the program. You don't have to wait 40 years or 20 years. If you get a grant, it can move forward quickly.
So the Adams Point project, I got the boot after I left.
Which one?
The Adams Durham Point Road.
Oh, well, so that's still in the metro plan.
Yeah, I know. It's a good example. We're looking for other sources of funds to work with. But yet it got it into the mix. It's on the table, and then I'm fine. But it was in the initial after the hearing, but then it's not in the plan now, I understand.
Well, for the 10-year plan. So that was part of the development process for candidate projects for the 10-year plan. And Wayne is mentioning a project on Durham Point Road. And unfortunately, my mistake, I failed to recognize that it was not a federal aid eligible highway, which eliminates it from the running for the 10-year plan. But there are other federal sources out there.
But it got it on radar, and that's good. That's fine.
And the cost estimate.
Yeah, sure. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah. And we were talking about hazardous situations where if 108 is cut off, Durham Point Road is the only alternative for a few miles. So that it's still.
We were in Ireland once. When the flood or whatever.
Right.
Maybe something. Yeah.
So it's still in the mix, just not going into the 10-year plan.
The risk of beating a dead horse, are we any closer towards moving to a more fully interactive online web portal approach where projects can be viewed and updated? And
we are working on that. I don't have any details today, but it's something we're constantly aware of. And what Peter's talking about is all these projects live, all the projects in the 10-year plan and nearer live in DOT's database. We have a similar database that we manage all these projects, including our out years projects in the Metro plan, the far future years. And that is unfortunately, a little more or less static, where we can update documents and put them on our website, but we don't have an interactive sort of live version. We're constantly working toward getting there and jumping through as many hoops as we can. So we are working on it. Yeah. Any other questions on the TIP process? Did it make sense how projects move forward and all that stuff? Just want to make sure.
I think you did a fantastic job of streamlining what is a rather sizable document. The only thing I think I would suggest is if we don't have to do this now, but if we could put out a note to all the commissioners and see if there's interest in maybe sitting down for an hour or something like that in a smaller group of 3 or 5 or 7, and get in a room and kind of pick at it and ask some more questions and things like that, and dig a little deeper so you understand even more about it, because there's a lot there to try to figure out. And I think you did a fantastic job highlights the interrelationship with the 10-year plan, etc., is important. little things like, you know, when it comes to grants, can you use grant money for matching funds for your community? If your community really can't come up with matching funds and you're sitting there watching everything happen in all these communities around you, you don't have the matching funds because, you know, you need a new plow or a new, you know, something, and it's got to come first. Can grants get you the matching money? You know, those types of questions and all that can come out and be discussed, I think. And so it might be a good query to throw out to people to see if anybody responds and says, you know, sure, I'd be interested in that type of a meeting. And more broadly, clearly, this is a very key document. The 10-year plan is a very key document. The SEDS document, you go to this acronym thing, you know, where there's 2 pages of acronym, you know, there's all kinds of different documents. But really, there's about 5, you know, that are really the key documents. And they mostly do tie in together. They don't all, but most of them do. And if people are interested in trying to get a handle on the whole thing, a smaller session might be a great thing for them that want to be in such a session.
I agree. You make me think that it'd be, I wonder if it'd be valuable for folks, for us to kind of summarize the various sources of funding that are out there for whatever you need, whether it's a plow or a new bike lane or something like that. Because we mention them when we hear about them from DES and DOT, but we're usually able to look out at least a year ahead on the various funding sources.
Yeah, that may be a very good idea, because I think the worst thing, really, not the worst thing, but the unfortunate thing is for people to be surprised.
Yeah.
And they come to the meeting and they hear something, and they have to go back and talk to the people who make decisions in their community and say, well, we can be part of this, and this fits in with this particular area of town, what we can do. And they say, well, when do you need to know about that? Well, how about Monday? You know, it's like,
if you need a council or a planning board vote or something.
so it would be good to understand the practical sides, and probably not all towns are the same. Big cities, the towns might not be the same. You know, you might have a different personal interest depending on where you're coming from. That's good thought. So that's kind of a thing. We could try and do it in smaller, you know, a couple of chunks of smaller setting for people who want to do it. You know, people don't want to do it, or they're not interested, or they already know, and fine.
You know, I think your key point there really is that, you know, the critical success factor that I always see is the matching, coming up with the matching funds. So, yeah, if there's sort of can be a marriage that happens between people, you know, every community has a list of priorities, some that are local, some that are going to involve state or federal highways. But, you know, it's always coming up with that match. It seems to be the key. So if there's other pools of funds available that help make that match, I think that's probably the most critical thing to get in front of people and to know. And again, sort of our role as commissioner, I have no idea. I have no idea when those are coming. Or, you know, I have no capability right now to sit down in town and say, hey, I just found out about, you know, another pool of funds that might give us, you know, matching funds here. So I think that's a key piece, and another place where a regional planning commission can play an important role in connecting the community to this much bigger overall strategy.
I think you're right, because I've been here for a few years now, or whatever it is, and I'm still waiting for the day where I go and I try and tell someone, you know, update somebody in the planning department, for example, or executive level in Dover on something, and I find out they already know about it. You know why? Because they make it their business to know about it, and they're tuned in and all that. But I don't surprise them very often. You know, I more often learn of something else that I wasn't aware of. But that might not be the case everywhere. You know, you might be the folks that, you know, really do need to give somebody the heads up, you know.
So these are good thoughts.
Yeah.
And I'd recommend we get. Because I've
After
already spent too much time.
and I close the public hearing. On 3, Commissioner Roundtable. We put aside some time here instead of talking at the end where, you know, there's no time left to talk because we're late, we're running late, or people don't feel like they need to get out of here, they're tired, or they're too embarrassed to say, you know, please, they're late, but please, I wanted to talk about something, but, and so we put this up more towards the front. And when we don't have a public hearing like we just had, it's gonna be the first thing right at the introduction. So we're gonna set aside some time so that people get to talk about their communities a little bit. It's not an endless amount of time, but we can stop squeezing it in at the very last second of the meeting or attempting to squeeze it in. So everybody doesn't need to throw something out, but this is the time to bring something up or throw it out. And before I forget, Chris Horton. Sure. You are very welcome.
Thank you. I guess I'll start by introducing myself.
Yes, thank you.
Again, Chris Horton from Somersworth, also a member of the planning board in Somersworth. Been on the board for 3 or 4, 5 years, somewhere in that range. Became aware that there was a slot open on this board, so after a couple months of putting the feelers out there, I was finally voted in, and here I am now. So just still soaking it all in, but I'm excited to learn more about the planning board, the regional planning committee, and some community stuff. But it's nice to see the Exit 10 study up there. I know we recently, within the past year, approved a 100,000 square foot warehouse facility on that stretch of corridor in 108. So I think that whole stretch is continuing to grow, and I think seeing those additional transportation improvements is going to be key to that continued success there. So I think that's all I got for now. I thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome. Anybody else? An update. Mike?
Just kind of building on Chris's point, some of you heard, through me, reports about our TAP grant and our CMAQ grant that, we've been in the queue for probably, I think Colin, I hate to say it, but it might be 7 years. I'm thinking it was 5 years, but 5 years in making. But literally next week, it's a milestone for us at Somersworth. We're kicking off pre-construction meetings for both projects. With our design team and our project team and through DOT, through the long process. If anybody in the room or your town or city has dealt with either an LPA project, local program administrative project, the steps and the hurdles and the loops and hoops you have to go through. But we're pleased that we're here. The CMAQ project is a redo of our High Street traffic signal corridor from Blackwater Road all the way to the Dover line. I think there's 7 signals that will be upgraded and synchronized in new electronic equipment and a new traffic control module with a software system that we can modify and improve efficiencies.
CMAQ means?
CMAQ is congestion mitigation and air quality, alternative air quality. CMAQ, all these acronyms. That's right. And then the second one is the TAP grant. It's a sidewalk improvements project, and mostly on High Street, from kind of an area where we have a major crosswalk for a high school, Franklin Street, all the way up to Washington. Very dilapidated side. The sidewalk in that corridor is so disheveled. Some of it we can't actually plow without causing safety issues. So that's a big improvement. It also includes a pathway that connects a middle school and an elementary school. That'll be a nice feature. And a new crosswalk feature right on High Street at Franklin. So those are really some prominent projects that have kind of come through this group over the years. And we're pleased that we're able to take it through.
Thank you, Mike.
Might be a little instructive. After 8 years of retirement, I was called to Eastern Maine Community College to be president last year in Bangor, and was on the regional planning up there. They actually do things. I work with, it's amazing. With Governor Mills, we got free tuition for community college students to attract many more people into the community college system. I had all the trades of high school. I had welding, auto tech. Angus King got me an earmark to expand our childcare in Aroostook County. We've been up there. I didn't realize when you're in Bangor, you're only halfway to the northern border. And I went west and south and north. And then Susan Collins, the Republican, does the big earmark to, we have 1,000 nurse shortage in Maine, and then she put some money behind it. And that was all done in the 10 months I was there. Durham is really trying hard on the housing issue. We have a commission now. If no one gets it right, and I'll be back on the town council. If I lose an election where there's only 3 candidates for 3 openings, I'll turn my badge in and go home. The voting rights issue will surface again in Durham. Who can vote? Suppression has been the theme of the legislature the last several years to try to diminish the college vote. The New Hampshire Constitution and the United States Constitution are very clear. It's where you're domiciled that determines where you vote. But the New Hampshire legislature is tied it to owning a car and having a driver's license. And that's always an issue in Durham. Lastly, gun safety might not be controversial. The legislature has removed the ability of the University of New Hampshire to regulate firearms on campus, period. And this is after, watching what happened at the University of Michigan and other places. When I was in the legislature, I was able to stop this. But later on, it's been changed. On the good news front, last meeting, it's in the minutes, I reported my concerns with Portsmouth taking land in Durham to do a water project. And as a steward of Wagon Hill Farm, I was out there and I noticed that it'd be much better to put the road up the side of the site and out of sight, out of mind. And so I went back to Portsmouth and Durham, and they liked the idea. And now the engineers are going to change the route of the construction roads to put them where they're not going to interfere with the activity. So sometimes good ideas come from groups like this, and then you never know. So I'd like to end on a positive note. Thank you. Great.
Since we're talking about good ideas and things, one thing that I've been working on really hard in Lee is figuring out how to get some ability for people that are homebound, because we don't have a lot of public transportation in Lee to get out. And one thing we're looking into is some way to have maybe once a week a get together for senior citizens, and we've been thinking a lot about, is there a little van or something, and wondering if there's any other towns that are in the same situation that might want to think about partnering and having some way, because we can't get coast, we can't get, we just have no way, and people aren't able to leave their homes and struggle with getting ready rides. Maybe we have a central activity to put together. So if any other towns are interested in coming up with some new way of doing this, that'd be great.
Thank you. That sounds like maybe something that you two can put your heads together, offline on that. It sounds like it might be some options.
Yeah, we have some possible funding maybe.
There's a whole movement around micro transit and sort of the, public version of the Lyft and Uber ride service. And especially as that's moving into, obviously full autonomous driving is not there yet, but I think there's that value in looking at and doing a full return on investment sort of cost analysis. What does it cost to, do an immediate online, call up a ride, get you there? How much does that cost versus putting in a new coast bus route or something else?
Maine does that, I think.
Yeah.
There is a full online with a common application in our region. It's town to town, whether they participate in those various, like Ready Rides, as Karen mentioned, but anyone can call Coast essentially, but the Alliance for Community Transportation, they have, you can call and talk to a person, you fill out one application that shows all the different services you're eligible for, based on your age and ability and so forth, and we'll sign you up for those various services. And there are all kinds of stuff. So I can chat
We're
after.
thinking too, of just hosting an event, something to get together,
Mhm.
and then having that, just know every week, oh, on Mondays I go and I can something, so just a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it may be possible to piggyback on a vehicle that already exists.
That's what we're hoping. That's what-
And it's unfortunate, it's a patchwork of funding sources, and if they can only use the buses or the vehicles for that eligible thing, it's kind of a pain,
Make a
but
quilt.
we'll find it, we'll find a way.
You know, I've been thinking about that too. In Newmarket, we have a food pantry and, you know, on Thursday, the cars line up, right? So every time I look at that, I'm kind of scratching my head. I'm saying, you know, here's people that are driving, you know, spending money to get in their cars to drive to pick up some groceries. And you have the same thing. You have grocery delivery services or grocery pickup. Like, I would think there's a better way to help address that need. That, you know, and like I said, even just an online system where if you're eligible to, you know, pick up your whatever, 1 or 2 bags of groceries at the food pantry, maybe there's also a way that those can just be distributed more effectively. And you're not, you know, backing up traffic, having a big long line, everybody's sitting in their cars, spending time, right? Where it's much more effective. You just say, you put in your weekly request and it comes to you. You know, so I think there's a lot of opportunities to, and dovetail that in with the same type of thing in surveys. That sort of whole micro transit to me is an emerging area that deserves a lot more thought in terms of how things could be implemented.
My sister lives in Barry, Vermont, and she takes advantage of that. And it's a more recent thing. And as long as you're home, when you say you're going to be home, there's deliveries. If you miss it, you don't get the,
Right.
you've missed your week. They don't have you're not that flexible, and you probably shouldn't be. But I think for the program, it might be something helpful. Absolutely. They still have Meals on Wheels.
There's Rocking and Nutrition Meals on Wheels that does some of what Peter's talking about, and I don't know all the details, but they take people to a site for congregate meals, and they also bring food to people, depending on the situation. So I think Newmarket, it would be in their area, Rockingham County.
We still on the roundtable?
Yeah, let me just check and see if there's anybody that's, 1 second, anybody else have something they want to say? Just keep it in mind for meetings. We're going to do this. We're going to try this going forward the way we're doing it now and just get it in at the time. And then,
Did you have one?
no, anybody on the,
Oh,
I can't.
shoot, I haven't been keeping track. I don't see any
Anybody remotely?
chats or hands.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention, we recently had a hazardous waste spill incident on the Lamprey River in Newmarket with home heating oil that escaped into the Lamprey River, which, you know, the way my curious mind works, and with the things in the news with toxic rail accidents and other things, I was like, well, you know, how do we go online and take advantage of, you know, our interactive mapping system, which I did. And so I'm really curious in trying to improve that process for public access too. So like, I went into the SRP website. Obviously, I can bring up a map of the Stratford region. I can bring up a map of where the railroads are, but I have no easy way to say, you know, here are all the places where a railroad intersects with a stream or a culvert or even just a road intersection. And that would be a handy thing to have. Because what I'd like to be able to quickly look at is, okay, if there's an accident here, like there was at one of the bridge or river crossings, and let's say it was a rail car or a bigger disaster, what is the immediate downstream implication of that? And since we also do parcel mapping for every parcel in every community, and that's a place, you know, we have the potential capability to have notified every parcel that's downstream of some incident. But you can't do that right now. You know, we're not there yet, but it seems to me like that's what we need to be thinking of. And we should be thinking about how to make that a more streamlined process for anybody to go in and better utilize, you know, all the money and resources that we put into these interactive mapping tools. So I would like to see, you know, scenarios that get worked out like that, because it's always a reactive mode. Oh, an accident happens and then, there's no contingency plan. I like to be a little more proactive in thinking, okay, we've identified, we clearly know where our railroads and where these critical intersections are, where the critical intersections are with especially water resources and drinking water, like we talked about. So, Ohio is going to face a major challenge with PFAS and other things, of whatever chemicals contaminated that water. It's all downstream into the Ohio River. And we should know that. And we should know that up front. And we should have maps that quickly and easily show us that. And we should have a way that quickly and easily identifies every individual parcel that's affected by that. And that should be an easy thing to do. So I'm just throwing that out there again as, this is the challenge for us with all these tools that we have, is how to make that better, quicker, easier, and publicly available.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit in the earlier meeting for people that were at the earlier meeting, and we are going to make sure we understand in our communities what there is existing already with the emergency responders. There might be this whole world of stuff out there that they're using that we're not actually in tune with. It would be very worthwhile for us to check in on that and understand it. So. Anybody else? Okay. So, here. I'm sorry? Jim. Yeah.
Thanks. Your first.
We forgot to put staff updates on the agenda, so I was hoping I could perhaps just do a couple of staff updates really quickly.
Boss.
Yeah, Jigger.
Go ahead.
Thanks.
Be brief. Don't make it too long time, but go ahead.
We are still hiring for James's position. Many of you know James Bernine, who is our economic development planner, regional planner. We are still hiring for that position. We'll be doing another push to try and seek out candidates. If you do know any candidates, send them our way. Another just quick update. Next Thursday, 3:45 p.m. here is our quarterly commission meeting. That is the time when we talk about things that are not transportation related. We will be doing a short update on the regional housing needs assessment at that meeting in anticipation of adopting that in March. Then that will be followed by a more robust conversation here around the table. Megan has already sent out the agenda. I would encourage everyone to take a look at it. There are some questions there. So come prepared to chat. So you may need to reach out to staff in your communities to say, hey, what's going on? So we'll having a more robust conversation here about priorities and how the commission can better support you in your communities and how we can better support you in your role as a commissioner. So come prepared to chat. The majority of the conversation will be you speaking, not us speaking. The last thing I'll just note is Colin did send out the other day a very hefty document. This is and we've sent out many hefty documents lately. This is the 75-page one. This is just the final version of the work program for the next 2 years of transportation planning that we will be doing. It is still a draft. We've sent it to DOT for review and approval, as well as to Federal Highway. It'll then go to Federal Highways and Transit for their review and approval. This is a follow-up to the conversation you had last month at this meeting when Colin highlighted the things that we're emphasizing in the next 2 years are made change. So I'm just going to distribute. I have 3 copies. I'll just distribute them, review at your leisure here at the table. And yes, so I'll just walk around and that's it.
Thank you, Jen. Action items. We need to approve the minutes from the January 2023 motion on that.
So
I'll second it. Seconded Mike. We can do this way. I think we can do it. Yeah, do that in
Yeah, for these we do it.
Yeah. All right. All in favor of approving the minutes as stated? Aye.
Do we need to?
Any
Oh yeah, we do need to do
We can do, we already did it here. Jessica Wilcox,
Yes.
Steve Pesci,
Yes.
UNH, is he there?
You're muted, Steven.
Yes. Sorry.
Charlene Anderson
yes,
and Sophie Robinson.
Yes.
That covers everybody, and I think Karen was the only person.
I abstained because I don't think I was here.
Okay,
I'll abstain also.
okay, I'll make my comment that I always make. It's fine if you want to abstain because you're not here, but if you've actually looked at the minutes, you don't see an issue with them. There's nothing wrong at all in voting one way or the other on the minutes. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing against that. So just let you know. Okay, so that takes care of everybody. Everybody's an aye, except for one abstention, Karen.
Three.
Three.
Karen, Chris, and Don.
I apologize. Thank you. There's that short-term memory. Good. Okay, the tip we just discussed. Need to vote on approving the draft.
Yes, well,
Because
approving.
finalize it.
This is the, yeah, this is
Move
the
from
final.
draft to final. Okay. need a
And I would
motion?
just make a note that we're approving the draft, or approving the tip and the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the two items that were subject to.
Good catch on that. So I'll need a motion on approving the 2023 to 2026 tip and the MPO. So moved. Don and Tom. Okay, so we will need a call. Bill.
Yes.
John. Wayne.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
Karen.
Yes.
Barb.
Yes.
Katrin.
Yes.
Chris.
Abstain.
Okay, Joe.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Richard. Mark. Shift. All right, we gotta start over again. Close.
It's close.
I've answered to Richard many times in my life.
Glenn.
Yes.
Dave, yes. Out there is Jessica,
Yes.
Steve, Pesci. Steve? You're on mute again, I think, Steve. You're in vain. I'll come back to you. Charlene?
yes,
Steve? Sophie?
Yes.
And Steve, are you there? Okay, we're missing him. Okay, that's fine. We're finished with that. On to discussion items, the CMAC projects. That's Colin.
Quick update with good news. Just to recap, we had this Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program, federal program that DOT facilitates and we participate in. 4 projects from our region, one from Coast that we'd be participating in to reboot the, oh shoot, thank you. Can everyone online see the Word document with the notes? Okay, cool. Thank you, Charlene.
Yes.
Projects from our region, one to reboot the Commute Smart Seacoast program, one from Dover for parts of 108 near the high school and middle school, EV charging and a roundabout that's Durham and UNH, and then UNH by itself is applied for funds to replace some older buses, some with updated natural gas buses and 2 electric buses. So they're making strides on that sort of thing. The statewide, there were DOT was looking to award $30 million in federal funds for out of those the pool of projects of candidates across the state. 46 applications in total for $44 million. Less than 22 of those projects were for new electric vehicle chargers, and 24 were non-EV projects. So the news is Federal Highways just released a final rule for electric vehicle charging that lays out all of the nauseating detail of what needs to go in there, the number of ports, the charge levels, all that stuff, data sharing. So what DOT is proposing at this point is to set aside temporarily those EV charging projects so that everyone can get all the ducks in the row on the EV chargers, so that everything is coordinated and in compliance with the federal rules, and move forward with the non-EV charging projects. So what that means is there's potential based on the dollar figure for the non-EV charging projects that all of those could get funded and move into the 10-year plan. They still need to show a positive air quality benefit, which we're in the process of doing on the 4 projects in our region. I'm confident they will all show a positive benefit. What it eliminates is the RPC ranking process, which is just kind of a logistical bonus, where if all those projects can just move forward after the analyses, that's just a good thing, I would suggest. Just to summarize, I'm in favor of DOT's proposal of postponing the EV projects. No more than 6 months is kind of the ballpark guess for the time frame there. Let me see. So and these are notes from Bill Watson, and I've been coordinating with Len and Bill on all this, that there is a lot to review in that final rule. What I am most concerned about is the location of chargers. The NEVI program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, has very specific requirements for where chargers are located and how those get funded. There are a wealth of other funding sources for EV chargers. We want all this to be coordinated, but I'm looking forward to talking with DOT and all the different agencies about how that all gets done. So there will be future conversations about EV charging and how they get funded federally and where they end up located.
Colin,
Yes.
if commercial folk are doing, is there going to be these rules going to apply to them as well?
If they're using federal dollars, yes. But if you don't use federal dollars, you know, a business could theoretically just put a really nice 3-prong outlet on the outside of their building. I would suggest using a bit of planning with something like that, but an electric vehicle, or even better, an e-bike, just needs a 120 volt outlet. They could also just privately fund a level 2 charger in a downtown. Some cities and towns are doing that. So this is just for federally funded EV charging projects. So my advocacy is for a balance between the corridor-based charging. That's the focus of that the NEVI program. Super high-speed chargers on major corridors, essentially, and working our way down. I would advocate for a balance of the sort of technical term, or the jargony term, is destination charging. So you're not stopping along the highway like at a gas station. You're just making it all the way to your destination and charging there, where you don't need a super duper DC fast charger at a B&B if your car is just sitting overnight. You just can trickle while your car's sitting there. So a balance between that and considering all of where people are using them, who is using them, and all of that. So that will be part of the conversation.
I'm not as cognizant of this, but are there standards as to, did I read somewhere here somewhere that there's standards that people have to watch? Are going to be?
For the federal ones, yes. So the standards are, the type of charger, we want everyone to be able to use the charger regardless of the kind of car. So that's partially on the car manufacturers to use a universal port. But all of these federally funded chargers need a certain voltage level. It talks about that when you pull up, you should be able to tell exactly what it's going to cost you to plug in and charge for a certain amount of time. All of that data gets shared so that everyone is kind of sharing the resources and seeing where people are using them and making planning, planning based on that. So all those details are laid out excruciatingly in the final thing.
That's part of the 6 month.
We want to understand all that, yeah.
There's no risk of using money on the other ones when having less available for the EV chargers, though, right? That's gonna be figured out. So we're not gonna like spend through and go, oops, can't have as many EVs as we want to. If we're waiting 6 months, are they separate pots?
So,
There's 24 projects we're gonna go forward with, and then there's 22 projects we're not going forward with, we're waiting.
Okay.
Oh,
Is there any chance that we're gonna like, what if they cost more in this 24 than we thought? And then are we just gonna have a little less for EVs? That's gonna be the project.
good question.
Yeah, so one of the things we want to do is look at the other opportunities to fund the EV, I mean, there's CMAC, but there's also we have protect, we have some other carbon reduction, there are other avenues and other kind of funds that we can't tap into. And that's what we want to look at, what are all the opportunities to fund these projects? Understand how to coordinate on a state level, so it's not like they're more coordinated. There's still a lot of things we have to think through all the rules that came up with, making sure we understand everything that we are funding meets those requirements. So that's why we need 6 months just to try to digest this. And then we get back to whatever we come up with, but at least, well, I can't say probably in 6 months we get an update where we are. I can't say they have an answer, but we have an update where we are.
So we won't take money away from one together.
No, so we're gonna take we have about $30 million to CMAC,
Okay.
and those 24 when I said 24 projects, we are gonna basically fund those with that 30 million. And then we'll look at other funding for the EV.
So are we losing EV possible funding by waiting 6 months? Or are you just saying we think there's enough other funding that?
We hope to find enough other funding to fund.
Well, is it fair to say that by giving us a little time, we broaden the pool of potential funding sources for those EV charging program projects were applied for through CMAC, but they may be eligible for NEVI or the carbon reduction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but carbon reduction, other funding sources. So we hope to be able to find funds. If not, we'll prioritize the break challenge. Prioritize.
But that's a good question.
I just have a car that can't get charged until they come down and get it charged, but I really want to make sure there's EV charging available. So don't want to skip out on that.
Are there differences between the CMAC funding and the other funding sources that you're talking about as far as the plug-in or the criteria or whatever it's going to take? Because that doesn't make sense if that's the case. The goal is to get everything the same.
Yeah, I think we're going to try to do is look at what the rules are for the NIMBY, because I think those are probably good, solid rules to consider. Probably more, not the common sense rules, but I would think that regardless of what we do, we're probably going to look at those rules applied across the funding sources.
One thing, Steve has a question, but one I'll mention, Mark, to your question, the final rule did mention any projects under Title 23. So that's transportation dollars are going to need to follow the requirements about the number of ports and the type of connector and all that stuff. So I think they're trying to avoid any complications like that. But Steve, I'm sorry.
Steve, online?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think this is a really wise decision, and I applaud the DOT and the planning commissions for doing it. I think this is one of those weird situations where we're not going to have a problem with funding availability given NEVI and the other programs, but we will want to look at, maximizing some flexibility beyond what NEVI might offer. And I think taking the 6 months to sort it all out and, have a more comprehensive approach to this is both a wise idea and very fair to all the applicants and all the communities that are looking for EV funding. So I fully support this, and happy to have our EV charge application sit while this is all sorted out.
We had a dire forecast a couple of years ago. If we encourage EVs, we'll lose the money we need to maintain highways because New Hampshire is totally dependent on the gas tax. Aren't these two policies in conflict with each other still, or does the state have a plan on how to fund their highways? But when at the same time we're encouraging people not to pay taxes that would support them.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of I think those bills going through the Senate and House that they're looking to how to raise the, kind of charge for the, vehicle miles usage taxes going in. So people are talking about ways of making it more fair.
Well, I think they're doing.
I think they're still talking. I don't think anything's passed.
The other thing I'm uncomfortable with is that few of us can afford EVs. So the benefits of this are accruing to those who can pay for a $50,000 vehicle. I don't have an answer to that one, and I understand the reason we need to do this, but there are certain conflicts in here. We do have EV stations at UNH. I'm very happy that they're doing that. The town has one at the library in the parking lot. But the people who benefit from that are not most of us. There are a few of us, and that concerns me.
The EV prices are very different than they used to be. So just so you, as we buy more EVs, they get cheaper. And, with the tax credit, they can be just about 30.
But the state
even less.
revenue for highways is going down, right?
What's that?
Well, that's a legislative,
Yeah.
that's a legislative challenge, right?
Yeah.
The legislature, there's 400 of them, and that's,
Yeah.
we are the legislature. We elect those folks. I don't put it off on them. I think let's make the point. The state, while they're gonna do this, they better find a way to fund the highway maintenance. And I tell that to my state reps, won't do any good, they're all Democrats, but.
We definitely support it, because like I said, we don't get a lot of state dollars, that's betterment. And there's a lot of considerations for the weight of vehicles and other things too, and.
Thank you.
This is just a comment. I'm not going to try to ignite a firestorm with this, but watching the business news, it was earlier this week. I'm curious about the other funds that could come in to work along with the funds we've been talking about here that we're more tied in with. And when you have one person in the world who's got to be one of the richest people, somebody could be either twisting his arm or giving him Elon Musk opportunities for some kind of other massive tax breaks or God knows what. But the talk is that he's ready to cut loose and install many thousands. I don't even remember the number. It was a complete explosive number, and that he would make it so that they were open to other people than Tesla drivers. And so my question is, when it comes to finding other sources to coordinate and try to get things done and this and that, and I understand the federal connection, is one of the people that be included in the conversation, at least at some level, Elon Musk, because he just does stuff. Good, but sometimes it is, you go, oh, okay. Because even though we were talking the federal dollars, and there's a lot of other stuff besides federal dollars, I don't know how that might work, but it sounds like progress to me when somebody talks about it on a Monday and they could start doing it on the next Monday if they felt like it. And it's sort of it sounds like satire, but it's probably true. So anyway.
I like this thought, it's correct or not, that feds are looking at this and saying, hey, we have to have some consistency here. And what comes to mind is what happened in the EU. The EU said, you know what, Apple, you gotta be able to plug in your machine the same as everybody else. They've said, Apple, you can't have this unique system for charging your phones. That to me sounds like what we're doing here. We're saying, look, your standards have to be followed. So whether you're Elon Musk, or you're somebody else, you're not following those standards. You may not be positive for the environment, i.e. the people who want to buy these things. So I think this is about it.
Can I just add one last thing to that? Sure. I think
Last comment, yours.
the biggest thing for me, and I said before, is the location of them. Because there are federal sources and there is a highly deliberative process through the public sector, the federal sector, of all the considerations for compatibility and all that stuff. There is a huge private investment in EV happening as well at the same time. And I really hope they meet in the middle, where you could have a case where it's a lot cheaper and faster to put a charger away from stuff that people need. Like, I would hope that a charger could be in the middle of a mall or a downtown where it may take a little more thought and a little more money to put it in there, but that's where people are going. If you put it on the outside of town with no way to walk or get from your car, I don't see the point. I guess people could charge their car and just sit there and sit on their phone, but it'd be a lot better if they were going to little shops and hanging out with people. And that is the nice piece of EV for me, where you can't put a gas station in the middle of the town because it's a giant toxic bomb underground, but a level 2 charger, you know, with some big wires, and it's, you know, it has to be safe and all that stuff, but it is a little, it kind of speaks to that equity thing, and it makes things potentially
Just
better.
put a Freeport, LL Baines has 30 chargers.
Yeah.
Different kind of car.
And so that was a private market-based decision.
Well, it's in their best interest.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen until the vehicles get less expensive, let's face it.
So we can talk for days on.
All right, anything else, from we have some people here.
Comments.
Oh,
Feedback.
Steve, Sophie, I want to voice, Sophie from Dover, I want to voice support for the installation of electric vehicle charging stations. Cost of EVs is coming down, even if you buy used ones and EV hybrids. Charging stations are an important part of making it convenient enough to make them ubiquitous. I would encourage us to push for their installation in strategic locations where additional stations could be installed as demand increases, especially in strategic parking lots, walking areas, example, the train station in Dover. Highly agree there. So it's all part of a beautiful evolution of new and probably quicker than we think dominant technology. By the way, average new car price in US is now north of $40,000. EV prices are falling, especially with federal rebate. Chevy Bolt is now under $30,000. I can personally attest to that. So yeah, definitely agree. Thank you, Sophie. And I would say, hopefully last thing, if you have a location that you would like to see an EV charger in your town, we're sort of compiling those. And we have a almost prioritized list of all the locations, and just think of the amenities and where people are where it's gonna make the most benefit. And we're here to help plan that out.
Well, I think a place, an intersection of where Regional Planning Commission can help local communities is this all gets ended up being reflected in updated building codes and requirements. So when we start moving towards building code requirements that will require electric charging, you know, every community that's updating their master plan, I think what should be promoted, and again, I've taken the sales and marketing approach, is, hey, we can help your town implement, here's a model building code ordinance. Massachusetts is going gangbusters forward with those type of model ordinances and a new modernized building code that they're getting communities to implement. So, you know, I'd like to put action where those words are help the towns. Help the towns understand how to get a building code in place, make sure that's part of an updated master planning process, and find a way to, you know, sell the SRPC services to that level of update of every town's master plan. And then have a checklist and show us. Let's look at our town, how many towns within our region have actually implemented those codes. And who can you lean on if you want to go to help? Like, so if Dover's done a great job or Somersworth has done a great job, let's use those as models and let's explain that to everyone here in this room so that we can go back to our community and saying, here's a success story where it worked.
I think all of us agree with that. More information getting out there on where our 18 communities or beyond have been successful. Communication.
And putting in an EV charger today, it's easy. I'm working on my third one personally, locations, and it's just, it's really a no-brainer.
Steve, where are you? Oh, Steve Pesci, I'm sorry.
Yep, no further comments. I think it's all great. It's all good. And I agree with the building comments thing, definitely.
All right, so good. I think we're set, right?
I'll just on the side of projects, just a note, so I don't think I mentioned it. to the policy committee yet. SRPC applied for a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant with our three other MPO colleagues. This is to write a regional action plan for safety improvements. So if you have parts in your town where there, a history of crashes at an intersection or something like that, or a safety project idea, those can all go into that action plan. Essentially all the safety related projects in our metro plan currently would go into that. And so the deal with that plan is it then enables any town in the region to apply for implementation grants through that same program in future years. So that again, an 80-20 split on the cost of that project, but that's just another leg up. And so Wayne, like that, the Durham Point Road project would be in that because there were unfortunately fatalities along that. And it's a popular route with pedestrians and cyclists. So just a note on that, we will be moving forward on that grant as soon as we, as quickly as possible, starting on July 1st.
Colin, appreciate knowing that. Remind me, because that's a new program, right?
Yep.
That's a new grant program. Would that qualify for the things that we've been working on, the traffic safety audits, i.e. Blackwater Road, 108, and Sunset Drive and West High Street?
Those types of projects are part of that. Yeah, the safety related, the goal, the underlying goal of the plan is 0 fatalities in the state of New Hampshire. That's going to be the philosophical basis of this.
So a traffic safety audit would not be necessarily a requirement, a precursor to getting involved.
Yep. That's all.
Anybody else? Where are we in our meeting?
We're done, other than adjourning.
Okay, so
We're in the-
I do have one question.
Unless there's some person, again, I'm sorry, Mary, because we actually have a person,
A citizen.
as part of this meeting. I don't try to remember the last time that's happened. So, Mary, anything you want to offer?
No, not at this point. It was all very interesting. Thank you for all your comments.
Thank you for being here.
I just wanted to make sure we ask you before we crowd you out.
Yeah, I just had a question for Glenn. It's been a while since we saw you, and DOT had some management shakeups over time. I was hoping maybe you could give us a little update on the DOT organization.
It's easy. Whatever you knew is gone. We're starting fresh. Yeah, we have a couple retirements and things like that happening. So obviously, Commissioner Shaheen left. Now she's down in DC, managing. It's not Nashville.
Transportation Research Board.
Yeah, TRB. That's all right. Why did I shoot me? Bill Cass, basically now a new commissioner. Bill Cass's role was filled by Dave Rodriguez. He was our director of operations. Coming up shortly is Peter Stamps, our director, retiring. And Bill Oldenburg will be the next director coming up. Our human resource, Brandon Zwinsky left. So it's a replacement there. Dave Rodriguez's position, which is director of operations, was backfilled by his assistant, like Sergius. So it's a new look and feel. But just on the other hand, in terms of shake up our project development section, how we designed it, 50% vacant right now.
You think the governor's proposal,
5-0.
you think the governor's proposal to give you all huge raises will help?
I think it will slow the movement. I don't think it can stop it. We're still on pace quite a bit by the private sector. But even our GIS section, we're short right now. The plan section under me, out of 12 people, we're short 4. So we're, it's
Kind of fun.
yeah, we're struggling to find, bringing new talent, competing against the private sector for it. So it's, I think the raises will help. I think it's just going to slow people moving.
Thank you.
Just a question on that. On the planning board, we're getting multiple requests for extensions, waiting for, especially along 108 and other parts of the driveway permits and just things that require DOT approval. And we're now, it's a 90-day request always but for some of these people, it's been 2 or 3 delays that we've granted. And is that the reason why? Because there's just not the people who do the work?
Especially on the LPA side.
Yeah.
Program is, good news is that we actually, part of the vacancy in how we design, because we did them in planning now. We prepped 4 people from how we design, now we're planning to help with LPA projects. Because of the flood of bridge money that came in from the Bill Act, and we got 45 million bridge program. So we're running with that program, and 15% of that, 6.7 million went to municipalities. The state gave us another $31 million. We got another $31 million on top of that from federal highways. We had bridge money. It's just more. We have a lot of projects. But we get a lot of bridges coming in at one time. So try to manage everything, the projects out. We got 4 new positions to do that. We're kind of kind of short, but so it should be getting better. But the answer, the short answer is it's getting better. We have more people on board now, and they are distributing projects and getting them up to speed, training them. So hopefully we get that turned around.
It's just an issue because developers wait.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, costs are going up.
District offices, how are the district offices staffing that's where the driveway permits are reviewed and approved.
I know a couple of districts are struggling for assistant district engineers and then for permit engineers. Most of them, I think, are pretty well staffed. It's the plow drivers. We just don't have operating. We just don't have.
I hope Durham's request to put a road cut in Wagon Hill goes through fast because Portsmouth's grant only goes for 2 years. If we have to wait too long to get that permission, that could throw that whole thing out of whack.
Yeah, so we'll get more people now. So I think hopefully we'll see better response times and get these projects out. There's a big push to get these projects out. So the training staff and
there's no provision there's no way to get a provisional permit. Either you get it or you don't.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is it the same for
North is the same.
Yeah. That's right like that. Yeah.
I know the sports hub and some of them have been waiting for a while. There's near Hilltop.
Yeah. One thing I always encourage our people and towns too is that you get a handful of emails going back and forth for a while. Just pick up the phone and call.
Yeah.
I encourage our people. It's like after 2 or 3 emails, stop emailing and call. Get it resolved. I think I worked those out with that. Bob and it's like Tom Jameson was waiting for you. You went. Tom, I said, Tom, just call me because someone's disconnected. I can't tell you where, but so that's my words of wisdom for the day is that if you're emailing and not getting anywhere, pick up the phone or stop by DOT and say hi and chit chat with the person like that too.
And if you don't know the person in charge of your project at DOT, I can look that up. And there is a state database of state employees with phone numbers and emails and stuff. So if you know the person's name, you can look them up and contact them by phone or email, and I can find out who your project manager is if you don't know.
Reach out to me. I know.
Yeah.
So I want to double back. One little thing I heard earlier, and I really liked it, was Colin brought up about trying to come up with a list of funding opportunities and what the eligibility are. And here you talked about, trying to get the match. So a lot of these programs, we have like HAP and CMAC. They're going 4-year cycles. Right now, we're doing a CMAC cycle. Next 10-year plan, we're doing TAP and CMAC. So you always be thinking planning ahead, right? These are probably going to be CMAC, work with the towns, try to get that match put away early. And basically get these projects, applications on shelf with the match ready to go. They're coming. So it's not like, oh, I got caught off guard, I need the money Monday. But we really should be, I need the money 2 years from Monday. So we should, I just encourage them to really get out there and plan those projects out, have them on, get that page on shelf for TAP and CMAC. Every 4 years, we're going to be doing this. 1 year CMAC, 2 years later, we do this. So 2 years now, TAP is coming. So you got a TAP project, you think it might be eligible. Start getting the application ready, start working in town, get those matches put away. Try to raise that money.
Do they tend to have soft match too, or is it all hard?
We try to avoid soft match because of the federal rules and managing it gets to be cumbersome.
Yeah, but it's a lot easier to get.
The only funding source
Easier to
that
get, but easier to manage your thing.
Rec Trails is the only one that I know of that allows in-kind match for Boy Scout troop doing the bush trimming and stuff like that. But transportation federal dollars, cash match.
that we pretty much.
In higher education, it's usually mostly. Yes. We
Yeah,
also
well,
spend the most money on lobbying in Washington of any other group. Yeah.
All right, folks, somebody give me a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, everybody online. Appreciate you.
Yes.
If you have a project idea,
Thank you.
bring it to me, no matter if it's crazy. Just prove it.
Bye.
I would get those straight over government.